Hello, everybody. Happy June 13th, 2020. My name is Christopher Saunders, and this is the Connecticut Sports Talent Show, where we talk all things talents in Connecticut. And on today's show, it's a pleasure to be able to have the Senior Vice President for the Sea Unicorns down in Norwich, Connecticut. His name, CJ Knudsen. CJ, I've talked to you before on the phone. This is the first time I'm seeing you face to face, and it's a pleasure to be able to have you on.
Oh, thanks for having me on, Chris. This is a lot of fun. Obviously, in the world of virtual meetings and Zooms and FaceTimes and everything else, it's it's the new norm. But I'm glad I can be here as part of the show.
Now, before we get into baseball and some of the other things that we talked about prior to coming on, I just want to ask you kind of about your background and what led you to being, in the front office as far as baseball is concerned.
Yeah, I mean, I've actually always been a baseball fan growing up. Even when I was a little kid, my favorite player was Ozzie Smith. I used to I loved to watch him play. Played Little League growing up. Played baseball in high school. Ended up playing lacrosse in college. But when I was in college, I decided to study sports management and minored in business. And part of that deal was having to do an internship. So I did an internship in the Montreal Expos organization for the single A team in Vermont. So the Vermont Expos at the time. And spent the whole summer with those guys. And by the end of it, I realized, minor league baseball could be a really fun career to really get into. And so graduated college in '96 from Keene State College in New Hampshire. Looked for a job, couldn't really find one. Moved to Texas because my parents were working down there for IBM, and living in Houston, Texas, which was great. Except it's super hot. And then realized that I missed the East Coast, so I wanted to try to come back to the East Coast. And then it just so happened that the Vermont Expos were looking for an assistant GM, and so I did my internship with those guys, and they interviewed me for that position, and then I was hired with them in March of '97, and I was with those guys for 3 years as their assistant GM, and then June 2000 I was named the GM. So I think at that point I was the youngest GM in the country. I was 25, and kind of handed the keys to the kingdom, and was the GM for that club for 10. So with them for a total of 14 seasons, and then I loved it there. Loved working in Burlington, Vermont. That's where I grew up. Centennial Field's the oldest ballpark in minor league baseball. We had ESPN there for their 50 and 50 states. I mean, there's just a lot of great history in that park. A lot of awesome players have been through there too. Not only in the Montreal standpoint, but prior to that, it was a Double-A franchise for the Reds and the Mariners. So Ken Griffey Jr. played there. Chris Sabo, Barry Larkin. So a lot of history there. So after 14 years, I was looking for a new challenge, and then that's when I got contacted by our owner, Miles Prentice, and Miles called me up and said, "Hey, can you come and help relocate a franchise from Oneonta, New York, to Norwich, Connecticut?" And I said, "Sure, I can do that for a year." The game plan was the deal was for a season, and got there 2 weeks into it. He said, "Hey, can you stay for another year?" I'm like, "Let's just get through season one first." And so that was 2010, which was crazy. We got into the ballpark actually on April 1st, 2010, which is very apropos on April Fool's Day. And then we had to put together a franchise in literally about 2 months or so. And got our franchise going, got our players, got our staff, and had to clean up the ballpark a little bit. And we've had a great run ever since. And at that point, the GM ended up leaving. So Miles asked me to be the GM. So I was the GM for a couple of years, knowing that I was going to come back to Vermont to start a family, since I grew up in this area. And then, so after I stepped down as a GM, Miles asked me to stay aboard, help run the franchise from my house, and then go down to the games I need to. So that's kind of how I've been in the game of baseball. Seen a ton of baseball games, which is awesome. Crazy long hours, working at 8 in the morning, maybe 7 in the morning till 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, and if you're in the middle of a 6-game homestand, 6 days in a row. So I mean, it's all sorts of things they're dealing and seeing with. But so this marks my 25th year in baseball.
You really have accomplished a lot, and I think trying to pick apart kind of a little bit of the story that you told. You mentioned how you went to the Expos, or you were with the Expos in the Vermont. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. Was that when Pedro and Vlad and all them were there, or was that after or before?
Those guys were before, so they unfortunately never had a chance to see them play in Vermont. But we had Orlando Cabrera come through there, Jason Bay come through there, Milton Bradley come through there. Milton Bradley was actually one of the best baseball players I've ever seen. I mean, he was like this incredibly talented. So we've had a bunch of guys, go through that organization. Then obviously in the Penn League, you have a lot of players that have come through, start their career, and then next thing you know they're in the major leagues, 4 or 5 years later.
It's a real, it's a real joy, I think, because I think a lot of people misinterpret the minor leagues for, oh, it's just a bunch of guys who are playing, if the guys who really have a chance just make it, as quickly as, double A or triple A. But I feel like in some ways that's false, because you think about a lot of the prospects or a lot of guys who kind of go through the system from low A, high A, and so forth. I mean, just thinking about who the Sea Unicorns have had the last couple of years. I mean, Kyle Funkhauser, Matt Manning. You also had last year's first round pick as well,
Yeah.
whose name is escaping me, so I apologize.
Riley Greene.
Yes,
yeah.
thank you,
Yeah.
Riley Greene.
Yeah.
So it's like there's guys who come through and they don't have to be right to double A. Some guys just aren't ready for that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Riley is he was with us last year, first round pick. I think his signing bonus was about $6 million. One of the nicest players, one of the nicest guys I've ever met. I mean, he was really engaging with our fans. He was great with the players. He was great with our staff. His thing that he would always do on his own, and we never asked him to do this. He'd pick 1 or 2 kids to play catch with before the game, and so the kids would be in the stands, and then he would just play catch with them, for like 4 or 5 minutes, just to interact with the fans, and he did that. And he also made one of the best catches I've ever seen in my life, at Dodge Stadium. Very similar to like Willie Mays-esque, over the shoulder dive and catch, and he made that catch to end the inning, and he was just really good, and you could just tell he's going to make it. He's got all the characteristics, he's got all the 5 tools, as they say, and off the field he's just a great gentleman, which is awesome. So those are the guys they really push for.
He's a piece I think that could really be a part of a very good Tigers team going forward. I mean, you think about they've had some down years when they started to rebuild, when they traded Justin Verlander and others. But you think about the pieces they got back. I mean, Jake Rogers, the catcher, Daz Cameron. You think about Casey Mize, who they drafted from Auburn a couple years ago. That rotation, Franklin Perez, who they also got for Verlander. Those are just some names. And then you also Riley Greene. There's so many pieces that they have that it's a shame that this baseball season was basically paused because of the virus, and then, disagreements between the players union and the owners. But I think the Tigers are one of those teams that in another year, I feel like if things can get back to normal with the season and baseball and such, they could really pop.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're really building a great foundation, and it's been a number of years since they've had winning seasons, but they're doing the right things, and I was really impressed with the draft from a couple days ago. So they're making the right moves, and so I think hopefully they'll be very successful. Our relationship with Detroit is great. We've been with those guys. Our franchise has been with them since 1999, and they're great to work with. So we're pulling for them. Our agreement with Detroit expires after the 2020 season, so after this year. So it'll be interesting to see what happens, and obviously it'll be interesting to see what happens with the future of our franchise as well.
Now, during the seasons, are you – I don't want to say in constant communication, because I feel like it's hard to be in contact with anybody from a major league club every day because they're busy doing a lot of things. But have you ever been in contact with Avila, the GM, or Gardenhire, who's the manager, just to kind of, if they ever ask, how's Riley Greene doing? How is Funkhauser doing? Just guys like that, or anything in particular?
Yeah, I mean, Avila will actually come to our ballpark usually, twice a year, to see the players, to say hello to the guys, watch them play. And he's great. When he comes to the ballpark, we obviously love working with him. Our interaction is more with the player development people, the people that are really making the moves, people that are running the operations. So Dan Lanetta is kind of our primary contact. Dave Littlefield's another person that we work with a lot. So, because all those decisions are basically made from Detroit. So they're not made by us in terms of, who we're going to draft or who we're going to play or who's going to get released. And there's definitely certain protocols where, higher round picks will get more at bats because they have more money invested in them, which makes sense. So if you're get drafted in, a low round, the 40th or 50th round, you're probably not going to get much playing time, so you're going to play every now and then, but you're probably not going to get as much opportunity as somebody that they might have given, a large signing bonus deal. So, so we have daily interactions with a lot of those guys, during the season. In the off season, it's, we hear from them, or we call them maybe once a month or so, because there's not a lot of stuff going on. The daily interactions with them in season are things to do with travel. things to do with player movements, you know, things to do with public relations, things like that. So it's in season is incredibly busy. That's kind of the strange thing about minor league baseball is you're working 24 hours a day, especially with smartphones now. I mean, you can't hide, can't escape, can't go anywhere. But then once the season's over, it comes to a screeching halt, which is incredibly strange. Like literally overnight, it's like your phone's not ringing. Nobody's emailing you, nobody's calling you, which is great. It's great to be able to take a break a little bit, but it's just weird going from running 180 miles an hour to going to zero in literally 24 hours.
Well, I kind of compare that to what we're dealing with the pandemic. I mean, before the pandemic, we were all running around like chickens with our heads cut off.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, the pandemic shutting everything down. And like you said, everything came to a complete halt.
Yeah.
And now it's kind of like in some ways, looking at it from a glass half full perspective, being able to have the time with the family. And like you said, I know, prior to coming on, you're working on your roof. So you wouldn't be able to do that if there was a season. But I know at the end of the day, you would love to have a season, but there's some benefits to it. But I think there's a certain point like right now where, okay, let's get back to normal. Let's get things going because we all want to get back to normalcy again.
Yeah. I mean, we want nothing more than to, play on opening day on June 18th. I mean, and that's the stuff that we work all year long for. I mean, it's not a situation where, we come to the ballpark 2 weeks before opening day and just, get it set up and cleaned up and ready. I mean, it's a year-long process. It's selling season tickets. It's getting sponsors and advertisers, so we can have billboards up. It's ordering bobbleheads and promotional items that usually take 3 or 4 months turnaround time. I mean, it's all those little things that you're doing all those planning and preparation, for really a quick summer season. And, like this time of year is our busiest week period. I mean, because we have our players coming to town, they basically come in today, today or tomorrow, they'd start coming in. If they're driving up from Florida, they would have left already. And then, we'd have 3 or 4 days of basically mini practice, like mini camp. And then the guys start their season. And at our level, they play 76 games in 80 days. So there's 4 days off. So it's a ton of baseball. And so all we want is, we want to play baseball, and our fans want to watch baseball. And, because that's, people have been doing it for a long time. This is, I believe, the 25th year of Dodd Stadium, baseball in Dodd Stadium. So, a lot of people have been going there. And so to be able to not have that ability for fans to come out to the ballpark on a summer night to hear the roar of the crowd and the crack of the bat, I mean, it's kind of sad. And I think people really want that, or want that and crave, being able to go out and get back to normal.
And I think people also realize, at least I have, is that I've really admired what the Sea Unicorns have done, not just the talent, but just the way that the organization is ran and what you guys do. And I've watched games. I follow the team because I'm a weirdo. I love minor league baseball. I love prospects.
Awesome.
I love being able to talk about it. And, like I said before, what you guys do is something that I think a lot of organizations probably look at and say, hey, I like what they're doing with the social media aspect, or what they do with how they're with their players, or how they communicate with the organization that they're a part of, like with the Tigers. So I think that's something that really is something to like.
Yeah, no, thank you, Chris. I mean, it's minor league baseball at the end of the day is all about fun. I mean, that's really what it's about. And we're in the business of baseball, but at the end of the day, really in the business of entertainment. And we're there to provide a fun, safe, affordable outing for family. To come out, watch a baseball game, have a hot dog, have an ice cream cone, get a high five or a hug from CT the mascot, or now our new mascot, Sea Unicorns. And it's about giving back to the community. Over the past 10 years, we've donated $1.6 million in goods and services to the local community. So it's not just going in there and trying to sell a ticket and get as much money as possible. I mean, it's about giving back to the community. It's about having community events at the ballpark. Every year we host the 24-hour Relay for Life walk at the ballpark, which raises money for the American Cancer Society. Every year that raises about $100,000 to help fight cancer. Actually, this past week we hosted the Norwich Free Academy, kind of a drive-in style graduation, because of the whole COVID-19. So we ended up hosting them in our parking lot. So it's things like that we'd love to do because we're part of the community. And a lot of the people who work in our front office literally grew up in that area. Dave Skirmerhorn, who's our GM, went to NFA. He played baseball for the NFA. He was a starting center fielder, won a state championship with those guys. And now he's running the ball club. So it's great. It's great to be able to have local ties like that for people that are literally from that area running the franchise for him.
And community is big. I mean, just, being able to have done this show now for close to 3 months, the one thing I've really have, and I kind of knew this before, but maybe now being able to hear it from coaches and players and from yourself and others, community is such a big importance when it comes to a program or a team, because when you have the community around, or when the community can kind of be with you and hug you and support you, then you have that extra motivation. You have that extra support to be able to go out and do different things. And like you mentioned with NFA, which is Norwich Free Academy in Connecticut, who by far one of the very good programs when it comes to all sports, football, baseball, basketball, etc. Being able to have that support, people see that and notice that. And when they see a team, a minor league team like yourself, giving back to the community, that is well respected amongst the entire state.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, it's there's only 2 minor league baseball teams in the state of Connecticut. Obviously, us and the Yard Goats, which we love those guys. We ended up hosting some of their games at our ballpark a couple years ago when they were waiting for the stadium to be finished. And minor league baseball is great because you're able to share ideas with other teams across the country, and you're able to pick up the phone and call somebody and say, hey, we're thinking about doing a Star Wars night. What do you guys do for Star Wars? Or we're thinking about doing a scout sleepover. What worked, what didn't work. So you're able to kind of trade ideas instead of reinventing the wheel. And we're able to do fun things like a couple of years ago we changed our name for one night to the New England Lobster Rolls, which was awesome. So the guys wearing custom jerseys and hats, and we ended up selling that hat in all 50 states. We brought a lobster roll truck in, and so it's stuff like that. It's fun for us to do. We've done all sorts of different bobblehead doll giveaways. But Friday Night Fireworks is by far the most popular. That's where we'll draw 5,000 or 6,000 fans on Friday night to cheer on then the Tigers, hopefully now the Sea Unicorns, and catch a post-game fireworks show.
It's great to be able to have something like that, to be able to, again, connect to the fan base even more, but it's, and I hate to ask this question, but before we came on, we talked about how there's a list, although there's no official list, about, up to 40 or more teams potentially being cut, however you want to classify it as far as the minor league systems are concerned. Now, for you in particular, or maybe just for the organization as a whole, to hear maybe one day that you may be cut, next day, no, you're safe, next day, oh, you will be cut, that has to be hard.
It's incredibly hard. I mean, I think just like the pandemic that everyone's dealing with right now is really the unknown. I mean, and the unknown is incredibly tough. What we do know is, we just signed a 10-year lease with the city of Norwich in August of this past year, 2019. What we do know is they spend a fair amount of money putting brand new LED field lights in, at the ballpark. They have money still available in that account for brand new HVAC units for both clubhouses, strictly for the players' comfort. So they've already invested a lot of money and plan on investing more in the future since we'd signed a long-term deal with those guys. But having the unknown of, are we going to even have a baseball team there next year is incredibly tough because, it's tough to plan. And obviously, from going into this season, prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, we knew that it could have been our last year. But we also knew that, we were going to have a season. And so that means we were going to have merchandise and tickets on sale and a brand new mascot and go along to Unicorns, a ton of new merchandise, new promotions, a new look, a new feel for our entertainment in the ballpark, and all that kind of stuff basically got put on hold from our standpoint at the kind of like the worst time, because it was literally right when we were, finalizing and ramping up everything to get our season going. Granted, we are a little luckier since we're a short season team. We don't technically start until June. I know that the AAA guys and the AA guys and long season A, they're struggling right now because they've already should have been playing basically half their season and bringing in revenue and from a business standpoint, it's incredibly tough because they're not playing games but you still have expenses, and so obviously there's that's a really big challenge for a lot of not only minor league teams but businesses across the country.
That 10-year lease that you signed, I think that's big, again, in my opinion, I mean, I don't know anything about logistics or, any of the kind of
Yeah,
contractual stuff, but being able to sign that 10-year lease, I would think would be big because again, I don't know if Major League Baseball is the one that is going to make the final decision about, okay, this team gets cut because of this or that or another. But when you see a community make that much of an investment, I feel like that has to weigh something amongst, okay, if it's not like they haven't done anything or the town or the city has done nothing for the club in X amount of years.
yeah,
Norwich wants to see this team stay, and they've proven it. So I almost feel like if they were to eliminate or cut the program, or in this case, the team itself,
Mhm.
that would leave such a bitter taste that I don't think Major League Baseball, I don't know, maybe they may not care, but I think for what everything that's going on between the pandemic, we mentioned earlier about the fight between the owners and the players.
yeah.
I think that would not be a smart thing to do. It wouldn't be if they were to cut Sea Unicorns.
Yeah, I mean, I think minor league baseball is from my standpoint. Again, I am biased from it because I've been working in minor league baseball 25 years, but I mean, it really is amazing to have a minor league baseball team in the area, in the region that you live in, because it allows you to come out to the ballpark and have a really fun, safe night out, and very affordable. And it also allows you to, if you're a baseball fan, to help, pass on that love of the game of baseball to your kids, to your sons and daughters, and have them learn and grow up, learning about baseball. And then what they do is they become baseball fans, and then they end up following their major league club, and they end up buying merchandise and buying tickets and becoming a lifelong fan. And I think if there's a potential of some 42 minor league baseball teams across the country basically being eliminated and not having any baseball, then that could have an impact on the game. That could have an impact on the growth of the game, on the fan base, and because if you don't watch baseball and you don't really know what baseball is all about, then you're probably not going to follow it. And if you're not going to follow it, then you're probably not going to buy tickets, and you're not going to buy merchandise, and you're not going to be a fan of a particular team. So it's a really slippery slope.
I mean, just think about what they did with the draft this year and what they're going to do next year. The limited amount of rounds, the amount of allotted money that they can only sign, they can offer the player, but it's like they're cutting that by, I think it was like 20%, 25%. You mentioned too about, and I think that's a great point that you raise about the future of the game. They're not only hurting what is the players now, but also players that haven't even signed contracts yet and coming in. And then you
Yeah,
have players that are let's say there's that two-way player, which now we're starting to see a lot of, who
yeah,
play multiple sports, but also multiple positions. Now they're seeing what's going on with baseball, and they're like, wait, the NBA is going to be playing pretty soon. I know
yeah,
the players have been kind of this, a little bit
sure.
distraught about that. The NFL is going to be, it looks like they're going to be playing pretty soon
Mm-hmm.
as well. You do not want to lose more fans than what they already have the last few years, because I know the ratings as far as viewership has gone down.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's you know, all of our players that come to play for us, I mean, they're
Mhm.
incredible athletes. I mean, they obviously got scholarships or could have gotten scholarships to play baseball at college. A lot of them are unbelievable football players and basketball players. I mean, so it's like, they can pick and choose what sport they want to play, and they're literally phenomenal at it. And so, yeah, I think you're right. I mean, if they're not growing the game of baseball, and they're starting to limit some of the financial potential that some of the players can get, especially when it comes to signing bonuses, then maybe they are going to look at towards other sports. And that's concerning, because baseball is America's pastime, and it's been around for obviously over a century, and people grow up watching and playing baseball, and that's kind of the rite of passage of playing t-ball and playing little league and high school, and if you're good enough in college, and then obviously if you can live your dream of playing professionally. And that's the stuff that we see on a regular basis. We see guys that they were the best baseball player growing up in their town, in their city, in their state, and they're good enough to play professional baseball, but they also realize and know that the guy that's standing next to them is 10 times better than them. And so but they know that they're going to play baseball for a year or two professionally, be able to tell their kids and grandkids about it and have a lot of fun doing it. And maybe they get a lucky break, and maybe they work hard and get promoted to the next level, and then maybe they continue to do that. And maybe they can make it to the majors for a number of years. There's a player in Vermont, Jamie Carroll, who ended up making it to the majors. He was one of those guys that he wasn't a top prospect. He just worked his butt off, and he got some lucky breaks here or there. And next thing you know, he had like a 10 or 11 year major league career. And that's just what a situation where he wasn't paid a large sign-in bonus. You know, he was probably just going to fill a roster at some point, and then kept on working hard, and you know, really was determined and made it. So, so you really never know, you know, who's going to make it. Yeah, you have people that are top prospects that get a lot of money, and they have a much greater chance of making it. But sometimes those guys don't, you know, make it either and fizzle out.
That's the beauty of Major League Baseball, and I think that's in a lot of ways is what separates baseball from the NFL and the NBA, because the NBA is, I think, just now starting to get some sort of minor league system with the G League, but
Yeah,
it's nowhere close to Major League Baseball or as the
yeah,
minor league baseball. The
yeah,
NFL, I mean, yeah, they pick from different leagues like the Canadian League, they pick from like Australia. I know they pick like punters, but again, nowhere close to minor league baseball. I think what minor league baseball is something where, yeah, you mentioned where about the prospects, the top guys like Torkelson, you know, he'll
yeah,
more than likely get there because he was picked so high and others. But then you have the guys who are like 15, 20, 25, 30 round guys, or just ones who are not so highly touted. But then you start to see that just give them a chance, just give
yeah,
them an opportunity, and
yeah,
they fight and they grind. And then if and when they make it and seeing that journey, it's admirable because it goes to show you don't need to be the most talented.
yeah,
You don't need to have the most outstanding tools. If you
yeah,
just have the guts, the grind, and the will and the passion and just a little bit of luck to be able to
yeah,
just get that crack, you have an opportunity and then you run with it.
yeah. I mean, it's very similar to Mike Piazza. Mike
Yep.
Piazza, you know, Hall of Famer, and you know, he was drafted down with like the last round as a courtesy to, I think his uncle was Tommy Lasorda or some sort of relation to that, and obviously everyone knows his name, and he made it and had a great career, and yeah, I mean, it's, you know, you don't need to be the tallest guy or the biggest guy. I mean, you know, it's every single different height, and every position is a little bit different, and so it's like, you know, everybody's got a shot to do it.
You know, think of like Albert Pujols. You think about Skip Shoemaker. I mean,
Yeah,
there's so many guys who've been drafted later and have had great careers.
yeah,
And it's a shame that, because I remember reading this in Baseball America. This was like months ago, and
mm,
I saw that there was discussions, and I don't know if they ever moved with it about having some kind of soccer style training where they get rid of the minor leagues up to a certain level, and then guys who overproduce at the level at AA or AAA, if they're not going to go to the majors and the team
yeah,
feels like they want to wait, they're going to put them in their just training center and just train until they're ready. And I
yeah,
kind of said to myself, but here's the difference. Soccer and baseball are 100, like it's like apples and oranges. They're not
totally,
the same.
yeah,
And you can't just have a guy say, okay, he's hitting, let's say, 500 at AA, like Vlad was,
yeah,
what felt like the
yeah,
entire year, you
yeah,
know? And it's like, okay, let's just put him in the bubble and just have him just train until he's ready. But
yeah,
what's not to say that he's going to struggle because he didn't get the reps? He didn't learn how to fail.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're exactly right. Yeah, I mean, you know, people need to play. They need to play the games. They need to ride the buses. They need to, you know, kind of earn their keep and pay their dues and every other cliche like that. But you know, that's part of the deal. I mean, it's part of the deal of having successes and having failures, and that's what makes baseball great, in my opinion. Is you know, a lot of times you fail at it, and sometimes you're successful, and you know, sometimes you strike out, sometimes you know, get a base hit to win the end of the game. So it's definitely magical when it comes to that kind of stuff.
CJ, it's a pleasure to be able to have you on, and hopefully you'll come back on another time because I'd love to be able to get yourself back on to keep talking about the Sea Unicorns and keep trying to push, because I'll do my best to try to continue on pushing to keep this team not just in Connecticut but also in minor league baseball, because like you mentioned earlier, there's only two teams in Connecticut as far as minor league baseball,
Yeah,
and there's other places that don't have baseball, and I've talked to people from there who say it's terrible. They want baseball. So we
definitely.
have to keep this team here.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate you having me on, and here's hoping that we've got a really bright future ahead. You know, we're planning on being in Connecticut for a long time, so hopefully the powers that be and Major League Baseball will you know, allow us to continue operating for a number of years.
That'll wrap things up here in the Connecticut Sports Talent Show. So until next time, stay safe. And as always, enjoy the rest of your day, everybody.